Thank you, Laura and musicians, for that wonderful offering. Daylight come, and me one go home. The first church I ever served as a United Methodist pastor was a small and mostly elderly congregation in a blue-collar community that was economically and probably a little psychologically depressed. The people there were wonderfully kind and patient with their very green pastor, and at the same time, the church was just kind of a low-energy place. So every now and then I would try to come up with something a bit lighthearted and fun to help spark things up a little. So when the fourth Sunday of Easter, Good Shepherd Sunday, rolled around one year, I decided to put out a call for sheep. I invited people to bring any kind of inanimate sheep they could round up for that day to be placed in the chancel area around the altar. And I will confess that I was not expecting much of a response from my low-key congregation. O ye of little faith. Now, Frank can verify this. I am not stretching the truth. I walked into the sanctuary that morning to find sheep scattered all over the chancel area. There were stuffed sheep of various sizes and colors. There were plastic blow-up sheep. There were little ceramic lambs. There was even a rubber sheep that you could take a bath with. So 25 years later, I'm still talking about it. What a great day that was. What a sight to behold. Biblical texts, as we know, are full of images of shepherds and sheep, which makes sense, of course, as sheep and shepherds were what people in ancient Palestine knew. But thousands of years later, many of us still respond positively to such imagery, even if we've had little or no actual experience of sheep. It's easy to see why. Images of sheep and shepherds are about protection, about safety, about comfort and care. And such imagery is powerful and magnetic for us because all of us have had times when we need to feel seen and known, called by name, held close and carried, guided and tenderly loved. So we are drawn to the image of God as shepherd in the 23rd Psalm, for instance, or of Jesus as the Good Shepherd. But what do we make of that other image that Jesus uses in our gospel reading this morning? Jesus as the gate for the sheep. Jesus as gate isn't exactly warm and fuzzy. So what might this rather curious image hold for us? First, let's look a bit more closely at the text. In the first verses of our text this morning, Jesus implies that sheep are not easily fooled. They know their shepherd's voice, and that's who they will follow, not a stranger. The shepherd, in turn, knows his sheep, knows them by name. But then things get a little confusing when Jesus declares, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. Thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I want to lift up 3 points that I've learned from a man by the name of Neil Douglas Klotz, who has brought his brilliant scholarly mind and his wide open heart to the study of a Jesus who is actually a first-century Semitic, Aramaic-speaking, desert-dwelling, wind-swept, God-soaked mystic. And the first point is the thieves and bandits that sneak into the sheepfold and seek only to kill and steal and destroy likely refers to those religious leaders who use their titles and entitlements, he says, to manipulate people's hopes and fears. Now, if you go home and before you even take your shoes off or eat lunch, but go home and read the story of the man born blind in chapter 9 of John's Gospel, which is right before today's reading, you will see there the kind of religious leaders Jesus is talking about. Of course, religious leaders who use their power to manipulate people's hopes and fears have not exactly passed out of fashion in the last 2 millennia. And those of us who claim that role and stand before others need to be on guard constantly, even in our retirement, about the potential within us to lose our way. I don't always preach just for you. The second point that Douglas Klotz would help us see is that when Jesus says, "I am the gate, whoever enters by me will be saved," that this has nothing to do with sin and salvation, which are later concepts. But the Aramaic is closer to, "I am the gate, whoever enters by me will be renewed." And the third point is that when Jesus contrasts himself to these manipulative religious leaders and their destructive ways by declaring that he came that people may have life and have it abundantly, the Aramaic, again, is more precisely translated, "I have come to give life energy to people and something even more." Now let's just take a minute to breathe that in. I have come to bring life energy to people and something even more. Here's what I think. Jesus is the gate for the sheep, or the door for the flock, as the King James has it. Or as Jesus says a few chapters later in the Gospel of John, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Now let's be very, very clear that this is not about restricting access to God. This is not about only people who are Christians make it to God. But it sounds to me like Jesus is a passageway. He is, yes, the shepherd that we follow, but also the passageway, the path that we walk. And this path of following Jesus through Jesus, we often understand as doing the kinds of things that Jesus did. And so as Christians, we seek to live out the vision of God's commonwealth of justice and peace by such things as performing acts of mercy and compassion, speaking truth to power, and proclaiming the unconditional love of God for all that is. We understand following Jesus as outwardly conforming to his life of words and deeds. Now, as a kid growing up in the church, I took this one step further and thought that a true follower of Jesus should surely dress the part as well. And that being a good Christian would probably entail investing in a really good pair of sandals. But proper footwear or not, if we claim to be followers of Jesus, this indeed is our calling, to do as Jesus did, to be the hands and feet of Christ in the world. But what if we also understand following Jesus not only in an outward way in terms of Jesus' action, but in an inward way as well? Not only to do as Jesus did, but to be as Jesus was. Now, doing and being aren't two entirely different, separate things. Our outer life, of course, grows out of our inner life, which in turn is shaped by our outer life. But what if, in addition to seeking to do as Jesus did, we were also to seek, for instance, to be in relationship with God as Jesus was in relationship with God? To perceive and be a part of creation as Jesus saw and related to creation. To understand our own identity, who we are, as Jesus understood his identity. In other words, to live into the Christ consciousness, to put on the mind of Christ, to realize and live into that divine image in which we are all created, just as Jesus most assuredly did. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will live renewed. Is this outward and inward following of Jesus the renewed life? Is this the life energy and something even more that Jesus came to bring us? Is this the table set before us in the presence of our enemies? Is this our cup that overflows? The early followers of the way, before they were even called Christians, understood following Jesus as an outer and an inner path, a path of word and deed as well as a path of inner transformation. But in the early centuries of the Western Church, that is Roman Catholicism and later Protestantism, this understanding of faith as a path of inner transformation lost ground. It lost ground to an emphasis on sin and salvation. From then on, as someone has said, Christians in the West were expected to be good, but not necessarily to evolve. Jesus himself emphasized this transformative path with his consistent teaching that we find by losing. We hang on by letting go, and we live by dying. The great Paschal mystery, so-called, is what we focus on and we celebrate in this season of Easter. That movement from life through death to new life. And Jesus, as the prototype, the exemplar, the blueprint of our humanity, has shown us the way. But we can end up making death and resurrection entirely into something that happens at the close of our earthly life and lose sight of the fact that we are moving from life through death into new life our whole lives long. And I can tell you with great confidence the date of my first death, the 6th of February, 1953. Do the math, 70 years. The day I said goodbye to the soft, warm, squishy safety of that snug space where everything I needed was provided me, and rudely shoved into the glaring lights and harsh clamor of a hospital OB unit. No wonder I screamed. And don't laugh, you all did too. You all screamed, I know it. Goodbye to the only home we've ever known. And hello to the great unknown. And think of all the deaths since, small and large. Getting up off the floor and learning to walk. Leaving the sandbox and packing off to the first day of kindergarten. Pets that die, friends who move away, grandparents who leave us, graduating and leaving home, changing jobs, acquiring life partners, losing life partners, lost youth, lost muscle mass, lost hair, on and on it goes. And we call it just normal, everyday life, but look at all the death, all the letting go, all the loss, all the change from day one. Death is woven into the fabric of even the most charmed of human lives. But that's the way it is because life moves and life flows, and we might as well practice going with that flow because as Easter people, we trust that on the other side of death and loss and change, something new awaits. But if we're so busy hanging on to what's right here and right now, we will miss that new life up ahead of us. And to paraphrase the Sufi poet Rumi, when are we ever made less by dying? When are we ever made less by dying? Jesus, our shepherd, Jesus, our gate, leads us along that same path that he walked, the path that leads from life through death into new life over and over again. The point is to keep walking and to do so with our eyes, our minds, our hearts, and our hands as open as we, by God's grace, are able to hold them. This is our path of transformation, and plain old everyday life is our great teacher. And even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil. For God is with us, renewing our life over and over, giving us life energy and something even more. Thanks be to God. Amen.